Tamuno felt like his life was finally falling into place. After years of hard work and sacrifices, he had built a successful career, found love with the woman of his dreams, and was just months away from marrying Tamara. Every moment with her felt like a promise of happiness and stability. Their bond had been one forged through countless trials and shared dreams. Tamara had been there for him during his lowest moments, standing by his side through financial struggles and the loss of his father. She was his anchor, his confidant, and his future. But everything changed the day Tamuno visited the village to see his mother. His family came from a long line of seers and mystics. Growing up, Tamuno had never really given much thought to the old traditions and superstitions that permeated his community. His father had taught him to rely on hard work and education, not fate or prophecy. But when his mother called him aside that day, the weight of her words pressed down on him like a dark cloud. "Tamuno," she began, her voice low and heavy with the seriousness of her message. "A prophecy has been revealed. You must break your engagement to Tamara. If you marry her, a great misfortune will befall you. You will lose everything." Tamuno felt his heart pound in his chest. His mother had always had a gift for seeing glimpses of the future, but this was too much. His entire world revolved around Tamara. She was his future. "You can't be serious, Mama," he replied, disbelief coloring his voice. "I love Tamara. We've been through so much together. I can't just walk away because of some prophecy." His mother's expression softened, but her words remained firm. "I know this is hard, my son. But these visions, they are not to be taken lightly. I have seen it, clear as day. If you marry her, it will bring about your downfall. You must end it now, before it's too late." For days, Tamuno wrestled with the prophecy. He tried to dismiss it as nothing more than an old superstition, a remnant of a past that no longer held sway over his modern life. But the more he tried to ignore it, the more it gnawed at him. The thought of losing everything, his career, his happiness, his future with Tamara, haunted him. Eventually, the pressure became too much. He couldn't shake the fear that the prophecy might come true. Reluctantly, he made the hardest decision of his life. He broke up with Tamara. The pain on her face as he delivered the news shattered him. Tamara had stood by him through thick and thin, believing in their love even when he sometimes doubted himself. But now, he was breaking her heart, not because of anything she had done, but because of a vague warning from the unknown. "Why, Tamuno?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. "Why are you doing this? I thought we were happy." "I'm sorry," was all he could say. He couldn't tell her the truth about the prophecy. How could he explain something so irrational to someone as grounded as Tamara? He mumbled something about needing space and time, but even he knew how weak it sounded. After the breakup, Tamuno tried to pick up the pieces of his life. But everywhere he turned, there were reminders of Tamara. Their favorite restaurants, the places they used to visit together, the songs they listened to, it was all too much. He had thought that breaking up with her would lift the weight off his shoulders, but instead, it only left him feeling hollow, like a part of him had been ripped away. Weeks turned into months, and Tamuno began to distance himself from the friends they had once shared. He couldn't bear the pitying looks or the uncomfortable silences whenever Tamara's name came up. Tamuno felt like he was trapped in a limbo of his own making. He couldn't move forward, and he couldn't go back. And then came Jasmine. Jasmine had always been a part of their friend group, but she was Tamara's best friend, someone he had never really paid much attention to. But after the breakup, Jasmine started reaching out to him. At first, it seemed innocent enough, just casual check-ins to see how he was holding up. But over time, her attention became more focused, more deliberate. One evening, when Tamuno was at his lowest, drowning in guilt and confusion, Jasmine showed up at his door. She claimed she wanted to talk, to offer him some comfort, but her presence felt different. There was a boldness in her eyes, a confidence that made Tamuno uneasy. As they sat together in his living room, Jasmine began to open up in ways Tamuno had never seen before. She spoke about her own struggles, how she had always felt overshadowed by Tamara's presence, how difficult it had been to watch Tamuno and Tamara together when she had secretly harbored feelings for him all along. Tamuno listened, stunned by her confession. He had never considered Jasmine in that way before. But as she moved closer, her words and her actions began to blur the lines between comfort and something else entirely. Before he knew it, Jasmine kissed him. The shock of the moment jolted him to his core. A whirlwind of emotions swirled in his head. Part of him wanted to pull away, to stop this before it went too far. But another part of him, the part that was still reeling from the breakup and the prophecy, was drawn to the idea of escape, of forgetting his pain, even if only for a moment. Jasmine's kiss felt like a betrayal, not just to Tamara, but to himself. But he didn't stop it. After that night, Tamuno felt even more lost. He had betrayed Tamara, the woman he still loved, with her best friend. Guilt and confusion gnawed at him. He didn't know what to think, what to feel, or what his actions meant for his future. Jasmine, on the other hand, acted as if nothing had changed. She continued to reach out to him, offering him support, trying to fill the void Tamara had left behind. But Tamuno couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Jasmine's sudden interest in him, her bold move that night, it all felt too convenient, too orchestrated. Tamuno's mind kept returning to the prophecy. Was this part of it? Had he unwittingly set into motion the very downfall his mother had warned him about? Was Jasmine the misfortune that was meant to befall him? His thoughts spiraled as he began to question everything. Had the prophecy truly been about Tamara, or was it about Jasmine all along? The lines between fate and free will blurred as Tamuno found himself tangled in a web of choices he no longer understood. Unable to face the uncertainty any longer, Tamuno sought out his mother again, desperate for clarity. "Mama," he pleaded, "I did what you said. I ended things with Tamara, but now I don't know if it was the right decision. I feel like everything is falling apart. I need to know, was the prophecy about her or someone else?" His mother's eyes, once filled with certainty, now held a sadness that mirrored his own. She sighed deeply before responding. "Tamuno, the future is never set in stone. Prophecies are glimpses of what could be, not what must be. You have the power to shape your own fate, but only if you trust your heart and your instincts." Her words offered little comfort, but they planted a seed of doubt in his mind. Had he acted out of fear rather than love? Had he allowed a vague warning to dictate his life, rather than trusting in the bond he had shared with Tamara? In the days that followed, Tamuno found himself at a crossroads. He could continue down the path he was on, with Jasmine at his side, or he could try to make amends with Tamara, the woman who still held his heart. But as he tried to reach out to Tamara, he discovered that things had changed. Tamara had moved on, or at least she appeared to. She had thrown herself into her work, surrounded herself with friends, and was doing everything in her power to rebuild her life without him. Tamuno felt a pang of regret. He had pushed her away, and now it seemed like he had lost her for good. But deep down, he knew he couldn't move on until he confronted his feelings. He needed to talk to Tamara, to explain why he had broken up with her, even if she didn't want to hear it. When they finally met again, Tamara listened in silence as Tamuno told her about the prophecy, about his fear of losing everything, and about his regret for letting it control his decisions. Tamara looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "Tamuno, I loved you with all my heart. But you let fear dictate our future. You didn't trust me, and you didn't trust yourself. I don't know if we can ever go back to what we were." Her words stung, but they were the truth. As Tamuno walked away from that conversation, he realized that the prophecy had come true, not in the way he had feared, but in a way he had never expected. By trying to avoid his downfall, he had created it himself. Now, he was left to pick up the pieces of a life shaped by choices he could never take back. Tamuno couldn't shake the emptiness that clung to him after the conversation with Tamara. It felt like a final blow to everything he had believed in. Walking aimlessly through the streets, his mind raced back and forth between memories of his time with her and the moments that led to their breakup. He kept replaying the prophecy, wondering if things could have been different if he had made a different choice. The world felt quieter without Tamara in it, and the weight of his regrets pressed down harder than ever. But as much as he wanted to turn back the clock, he knew Tamara was right. He had let fear dictate their future, and he had lost her because of it. There was no going back now, only forward. Days turned into weeks, and Tamuno did his best to focus on his work. He threw himself into projects, hoping the distraction would ease the pain, but the hollowness followed him like a shadow. His heart was a battlefield of unresolved emotions, and the guilt of what had happened with Jasmine only added to the turmoil. Jasmine kept reaching out, sending messages and trying to see him again, but Tamuno couldn't bring himself to face her. The kiss that night had been a mistake, and he knew it. It wasn't that he blamed her, after all, she had her own feelings and desires, but Tamuno realized that he was in no place to be involved with anyone, especially not Tamara's best friend. One afternoon, Jasmine showed up at his apartment unexpectedly. The moment he opened the door and saw her standing there, Tamuno's chest tightened. He knew they needed to talk, but he dreaded the conversation. "Tamuno," she began, her voice soft but firm. "You've been avoiding me. We need to talk about what happened." He gestured for her to come in, even though every part of him wanted to avoid this conversation. They sat in silence for a moment, the tension hanging in the air like a weight between them. "Jasmine," Tamuno finally said, his voice strained, "what happened that night? It was a mistake." She flinched slightly, but she didn't interrupt him. "I was lost, confused. Everything with Tamara was tearing me apart, and I let my emotions get the best of me. I shouldn't have let things go as far as they did." Jasmine's eyes searched his face for a moment, her expression unreadable. "I know, Tamuno. I know it wasn't supposed to happen like that. But you should know that I've had feelings for you for a long time. I never acted on them because you were with Tamara, and she's my best friend. But after you two broke up, I thought maybe there was a chance for us." Tamuno felt a wave of guilt wash over him. Jasmine's feelings were real, but he couldn't reciprocate them. Not after everything that had happened. "I'm sorry, Jasmine," he said softly. "But I'm still in love with Tamara. Even though we are not together anymore, my heart hasn't changed. And I can't be with you, not like this. It wouldn't be fair to you, to Tamara, or to myself." Jasmine looked away, blinking back tears. "I see," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I just thought, maybe you felt the same way." Tamuno reached out and gently touched her hand. "I care about you, Jasmine. But what happened between us, it can't happen again. I need to figure things out on my own, and I think you deserve someone who can love you fully, without being tied to the past." She nodded, though the sadness in her eyes was unmistakable. After a long moment, she stood up and gave him a sad smile. "I guess this is goodbye then. I hope you find what you're looking for, Tamuno." And with that, she walked out of his life, leaving Tamuno alone once again, this time with a sense of finality. As the days passed, Tamuno tried to make peace with his decisions. He knew he had hurt both Tamara and Jasmine, but he also knew he couldn't change the past. What he could do, however, was learn from his mistakes and try to build a future that wasn't dictated by fear or uncertainty. One day, As he sat by the window, staring out at the street below, Tamuno's phone buzzed. It was a message from Tamara. "Can we talk? I think there's something we need to clear up." His heart raced as he stared at the screen. He hadn't expected to hear from her again, not after their last conversation. Tamuno hesitated for a moment before typing out a reply. "Of course. When are you free?" They agreed to meet at a quiet cafe later that evening. As Tamuno made his way to the cafe, his mind buzzed with anticipation and anxiety. He didn't know what Tamara wanted to say, but a part of him hoped this might be a chance for closure, or maybe even reconciliation. When he arrived, Tamara was already there, sitting at a table near the back. She looked up as he approached, and for a moment, the sight of her took his breath away. She looked as beautiful as ever, but there was a new strength in her eyes, a resolve that hadn't been there before. "Thanks for coming," she said, offering a small smile. "Of course," he replied, sitting down across from her. "What's on your mind?" Tamara took a deep breath before speaking. "I've had some time to think about everything that happened between us, and I realized that I never really understood why you ended things. You mentioned needing space, but I always felt like there was something more. I need to know, Tamuno, was it really just about us, or was there something else?" Tamuno felt his stomach drop. He had kept the truth about the prophecy from her for so long, but now, he knew he couldn't hide it any longer. She deserved to know the real reason. "There was something else," he admitted, his voice heavy with guilt. "It wasn't just about needing space. It was about a prophecy." Tamara frowned, confused. "A prophecy? My mother has this gift. She sees things sometimes, glimpses of the future. When I went to visit her, she told me that if I married you, it would lead to my downfall. She said I would lose everything. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to lose you, but I was terrified that the prophecy would come true. So, I made the decision to end things, hoping it would protect us both." Tamara stared at him in disbelief, her eyes wide with shock. "You broke up with me because of a prophecy? You let something like that dictate our future?" Tamuno hung his head, ashamed. "I know how it sounds. I know it was wrong. But at the time, I was scared, and I thought I was doing the right thing." Tamara shook her head, her expression a mix of hurt and anger. "I can't believe you didn't trust me enough to talk to me about it. We could have faced it together. But instead, you let fear make the decision for you." "I'm sorry, Tamara," Tamuno said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought I was protecting you, but I see now that I only made things worse." There was a long silence between them as Tamara processed his words. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm but resolute. "I loved you, Tamuno. I thought we had a future together. But now, I realize that maybe we were never meant to be. You made a choice based on fear, and that's not the kind of foundation I want for my life. I need someone who trusts me, who believes in us, no matter what." Tamuno's heart sank. He knew she was right. He had let fear control him, and now he was paying the price. "I understand," he said quietly. I hope you can forgive me." Tamara looked at him for a long moment before nodding. "I forgive you, Tamuno. But forgiveness doesn't mean we can go back to what we had. I think it's best if we both move on." Her words felt like a final goodbye, and though they stung, Tamuno knew they were necessary. He had lost Tamara, but in that moment, he realized that holding on to her was never about love, it was about fear. And now, it was time to let go. As they stood to leave, Tamuno felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. He had made mistakes, but he had also learned from them. And though the future was uncertain, for the first time in a long while, Tamuno felt like he could face it without fear. Walking away from the cafe, he realized that his journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more difficult decisions to make. But whatever came his way, Tamuno knew that he would trust in himself and in the choices he made. What do you think of this captivating story? Leave your comments below and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any updates. Thank you for following us this far and see you in the next video.